So, compression can be intimidating, right? Out of all the different plugins and things, I think that compression is one of the ones that's kind of the hardest to learn how to hear and understand. We can kind of typically wrap our mind around EQ pretty quickly, time-based effects, reverbs, delays, we hear what they're doing. But that darn compression, and that took a little while when I was first learning for me to really understand what was going on and why it was important. So I thought that I would make a quick video here just to give you guys some of the basics of compression.
At McCray Music.
How are you doing? I'm richly blessed. I pray that you are as well. All right. We need to talk about compression. So, compression, or a compressor's job, is to deal with dynamic range, right? What is dynamic range? So if I have a vocal and I am talking, there is a dynamic range to my voice where I might get quieter at certain times and I might get louder at other times, and then sometimes I'm talking like this, and then sometimes I might get really excited and yell, right? So that's dynamic range, right? The movement or the amplitude of my vocal or a guitar or a drum or whatever it is that we have captured, it is going to move, right? We need to be able to control that, because the problem with dynamic range is, like I said, some things are going to be really loud, some things are going to be really quiet, some things are going to be in the middle. And if we leave it that way, it's going to be very difficult for us to mix it, or even just listening to it by itself. Certain parts are going to be very, very, clearly audible. Certain parts might be way too loud and hurt someone's ears. Other parts might be too quiet, make them have to turn it up. It's kind of like when you are watching TV. I hate when I'm watching TV and like the program I'm watching is at one level and then the commercial comes in and it's blaring, and so you rush to turn the TV down, and then your program comes back on and then you can't hear anything because it's too low, so you turn it back up, right? And then the commercial comes in and it wakes everybody up in the house, right? We don't want that in our mixes, right? We want the listening experience to be pleasant. So our compressor is basically going to do this, right? We're going to use the compressor to get a hold of the dynamic range, push down the things that are above a certain level, bring up some of the things that are below a certain level, and give us a nice, tight, compact, more well-managed dynamic range that we can then take and turn the volume of the whole thing up or down, right? So that it is the way we need it to be inside of the mix. Okay, and it takes a while for you to really wrap your head around it, but I want to demonstrate and just show you some of the basic components that you'll find on pretty much any compressor. Before we get into that, why don't you take a moment and like this video? And after you like it, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Let people know, or subscribe to it so you can know. Then you can share it to let other people know about what's going on this channel. And without further ado, let's take a look at a compression plugin and talk about the different elements that we would find in any compressor. All right, guys, so here we have a vocal, and without even listening to this, this is a vocal of my son reading a poem. And without even listening to this, just by looking at the waveforms, we can see that there are lots of differences in dynamic range here that we need to deal with, right? We have some mid peaks here, we have some low valleys here, lower valleys, higher peaks, right? So the dynamic range is all over the place because he's 9 and, it's a kid reading something, all right? So vocal inflections, all kinds of different things are happening here. So we need to get control of this. So we're going to use a compressor to control the movement of the dynamic range and make it more manageable, so we can then deal with the volume of it however it is that we want to, without things going too crazy when it's too high, or it not being able to be heard when he speaks too low. So I'm in Logic here. I know you guys are used to seeing me in Luna. I wanted to use Logic simply so that I could use one of the stock compressors. I wanted to use a compressor that anybody could have access to without worrying about having to have a plugin subscription or anything like that. So here we have the stock Logic compressor, and I'm going to leave it on just the regular Platinum Digital default setting because this style of compressor has all the different things that a compressor would have. Some of these other ones don't have like attack and release and things like that. So we're going to stick with this guy right here. All right, so let's go over the different pieces of a compressor very quickly, and then we will demonstrate how we can use this to kind of rein this vocal's dynamic range in a little bit. The first area we have here is input gain. Most compressors will have this. This is going to allow me to deal with the level of signal coming into the compressor. If you've watched any of my videos dealing with mixing, I've talked about gain staging, and I've talked about the importance of having a good signal, an adequate signal coming into your compressor. So basically the compressor has something to react to, right? If it's really, really low, the compressor is really not going to have anything to react to. We're not going to be able to drive it the way we want. It's not going to give us what we need. And so in that case, if you didn't choose to like gain, clip gain it up out here, we could come in here, we could dial up or dial back even the gain coming in so that we can then have a proper signal to work with. Then we have the threshold, and the threshold is basically us setting the point in which we want the compressor to react. All right. So if we set the threshold up really high, then that means that the vocal is really only going to react at the louder standpoints or points of the dynamic range. If we set the threshold really low, that means it's going to react to more stuff, right? So we want to find a sweet spot where it is kind of not reacting too much and not reacting too little. We want to get that good sweet spot of threshold there. Ratio is going to be how strongly the compressor reacts. All right, so we have different ratios, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, right, 4-to-1, all these different kinds of things in here. All right, and this is dealing with the strength of the compressor, how strong the compressor is going to squash or push down what is going on. All right, so the way that this was explained to me when I was first learning would be, all right, so for every one, for example, if I have it on a 2-to-1 ratio, right, for every 1 dB that it comes in over the threshold, it's going to push it down 2. All right, something of that nature. Somebody else might have a better way of explaining that, but that's kind of what makes sense to me. Okay, and again, we can play around with that to get what we want. Then we have makeup gain, all right? And what this is going to allow us to do is have our compressed signal. So again, the whole point of compression is not to diminish volume, it's to control dynamic range. So we control the dynamic range, and then we can basically turn the volume of everything or the gain of the signal back up with the dynamic range being controlled, all right? And it's not a thing where you have to match it. Like, let's say we're getting 5 dB of gain reduction. It's not a thing where you necessarily have to then have 5 dB of makeup gain in order for it to sound good. It's something you want to do to taste, but this is going to help us to then reboost the now controlled signal, all right? Now, in here, we have an auto gain, and some compressor plugins will have this where it automatically is going to gain up or gain back the vocal based on how much is being compressed. I tend to like to turn that off. So let's go ahead and turn that off so that we can play with this. All right, then we have a knee. Every compressor is not going to have this, but this is basically going to allow us to control the slope of the compression, right? Kind of works along with the ratio in a sense of controlling kind of how sharply things are being compressed. We have the attack, and this is going to control how quickly the compressor reacts, right? And we're going to want to have different settings for this depending on what it is we're compressing. With a vocal, for example, maybe I want it to jump right in there and just, there's no real transients in a vocal, so I might want it to just react very quickly to the vocal. However, if I am compressing a kick drum or a snare drum, something that has transients, I might not want it to react or attack it as fast because it'll cut off the transient, it'll squash it, and it won't pop the way I want it to, right? So as you start to play around with compression with different things, you will notice that there are some things you might want a faster attack, whereas other things you might want a slower attack so that you can get the sound that you want. Then we have the release, and the release has to do with how quickly the compressor is going to release, all right? So the threshold is setting when it comes in. The ratio is setting how strong, ratio and knee, how strongly it comes in. The attack is how quick it comes in and catches that dynamic range. And the release is how long it's going to hold it. And same concept is true here. right? Depending on what you are compressing, we might want to have a faster release or a slower release. So if I'm dealing with like a kick or something like that, I probably want to have a faster release on like a kick or a snare, something with more transients, so that it's compressing each thing, right? I want it to go ahead and compress it and let right up, compress it and let right up. On the other hand, if it's something like a vocal and I want to make sure, or a synth or something that is a sustained sound, and I don't want it to have like a pumping sound where the compressor keeps reacting, and I want it to be slower to release, then I would give it a slower release time. Now, some compressors also will have an auto release where it'll automatically release based on the settings we have here. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off as well. Okay. All right, so those are the basic settings for a compressor. We're not going to worry about this stuff over here. This is dealing with limiting, and really all a limiter is a super strong compressor, like a really, really aggressive compressor. We're not going to worry about that. One of the things that we have over here also is a mix knob, where if I wanted to, control how much of this is being dialed in, I could do so. So we're not going to worry about any of this stuff, even though in the midst of saying that, I was worrying about some of that stuff. All right, but let's just listen to what the vocal is doing by itself, and then we'll play around with some of these settings and see if we can get some compression. So here we go.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes.
So we see right away, right, we have a decent gain coming in. We're not getting much reaction to the compressor because the threshold is pretty high. So I'm going to play it again, and I'm going to start dialing the threshold back until we get some gain reduction here. And let's just say, for the purposes of this, that my goal is to be around 5 dB of gain reduction, right? Don't take that as a rule. Let's just say that's our goal for what we're doing right now. So I'm going to start playing around with this until I kind of get like an average of 5 dB of gain reduction at the highest parts. Let's see what we got. And I'm also going to change the ratio. Let's go to like a 3-to-1 ratio. I tend to like to be around there. All right, here we go.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his hair. No comb, no brush, no hair products.
So right away, you can kind of hear how it is taming that dynamic range, all right? It's not as, and I'm going to turn it back off and then turn it on so you can hear. So here's with the compressor out.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his...
Let's turn the compressor on.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his hair.
See how it's keeping everything at the same level, right? I think we kind of got the threshold where we want. It's keeping everything right there. It's bringing the quiet parts up and it's bringing the loud parts down to kind of meet in the middle. All right, so let's play around with some of these other things and start seeing some reactions that we get here. We'll leave the makeup gain right around 5 dB. Since I want to get about 5 dB of gain reduction, we'll leave it right there. And let's start playing around with some stuff. I'll play around with the ratio first, and let's see what happens.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his hair. No comb, no brush, no hair products. Theo went to help his mom clean. No dustpan, no mop, no clothes.
Right, so we see as we bring the ratio down, it's impacting it less, right? Remember, this is the strength of it, all right? Let's start playing around with attack.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his hair. No comb, no brush, no hair products. Theo went to help his mom clean. No dustpan, no mop, no clothes dryer.
So we see as we're playing around with the attack, you saw that it was reacting more quickly or slower to the vocal, right? Let's play around with release.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his hair. No comb, no brush, no hair products. Theo went to help his...
So we saw as we went higher up in the release, right, it's coming back down more slowly, right? So usually, if we want to kind of push something back in the mix, we give it a longer release. If I want to bring something forward in the mix, I give it a shorter release, right? So that way the compressor is not holding it back, okay? So I'm just gonna let it play and I'm gonna dial everything in until it sounds the way I want it to sound. Let's go.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his hair. No comb, no brush, no hair products. Theo went to help his mom clean. No dustpan, no mop, no clothes dryer. They stepped outside. No lawnmower, no car that could start, no traffic lights.
That is fantastic. Let's listen with the compressor out and then we'll add it in.
Theo ran to get dressed. No shoes, no ironed clothes. He tried to brush his hair. No comb, no brush, no hair products.
Let's bring it in.
Theo went to help his mom clean. No dustpan, no mop, no clothes dryer. They stepped outside. No lawnmower.
Right? It immediately makes the vocal pop more. I don't have as big of a gap in the dynamic range, and it's adding some interesting character to the vocal. All right. So that is the basics of compression. And again, depending on the compressor that you have, some are going to have different things. Some compressors, as they are modeling different classic analog models, will not have a release. Some might not have an attack. There might already be a built-in algorithm that's dealing with that based on the threshold. Every compressor is going to have a threshold. Every compressor is going to have a makeup gain. Every compressor is going to have some kind of ratio. But some of these other things you may or may not have. And you'll see that as I start going through some of these, right? There's no knee for this one. There's no attack or release on this one, right? So, you'll see different things depending on the style of compressor that you're dealing with. But those are the basics things of compression. And I hope that that is able to help you understand it a little bit better. Okay. There's a lot more that we can talk about and demonstrate there, but I hope that that little bit was able to help you wrap your mind around what the heck a compressor is doing, what each of the different components are. You're going to apply the same principles to live audio. You're going to see the same stuff that's there. That's the great thing about audio engineering. Once you learn the basics of some of these different tools, you can go into any environment and you're going to find the same stuff. It might be in a different place or it might look a little different, but the principle is always going to be the same and you can use it in any environment. All right. Would you be interested in a fuller or longer course on something like this? Maybe a longer course on just compression? Right, I'd love to do that where I'm able to move a little bit more slowly, show a few more examples, really just take time to play around with each individual piece with different types of instruments and things and see, is that something you'd be interested in? If so, just let me know in the comment section, or you can, even go in the link in my bio and connect with me on my website and just let me know, hey, Ed, we'd love a course on compression, because I think that's something that I want to do, because I think that it would be helpful and kind of get you, especially if you're just starting with this, kind of get you going a little bit. All right, so I hope this was helpful to you. Please take a moment and like this video and subscribe to and share this channel. And also, would you like some other videos like this, like basics of like EQ or reverb or other things? I know I talked in high level on about some of those things in my mixing series, but would you like dedicated videos on those things? Let me know that too. Throw it in the comment section and let me know. All right, and I'm gonna see you guys again in the next video. Peace.